Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Graded for Greatness workshop presented by Canada Beef. Taste Canada is proud to partner with industry leaders like Canada Beef to bring these types of invaluable learning opportunities both to students and professionals. Uh, welcome. We're just going to ask you to mute. Thank you. Um, So through our educational awareness partnerships, we aim to share innovations, highlight industry trends, and offer solutions while fostering these types of meaningful connections that add real value to the important work that you all do in the food industry. For those of you participating in Cooks the Books this year, today's workshop is designed to help you better understand the beef cut selections and how the grade of your beef can enhance your dishes in the competition. Before we get going, just a couple of reminders, housekeeping items to again keep your mics muted during the presentation so we're not getting any feedback. The session is being recorded and I will share the link with everyone later this week so you can revisit any of the information and share it with others. I encourage all the Cooks the Book students to say hello in the chat and let us know that you're here and excited to be with us. We're excited to have you. And also, we'll be doing a slideshow presentation. Then we're going to have a product demonstration and then a brief Q&A. So if you have any questions, save them till the end, and then you can put them in the chat, and I will share them with the group. And then we also wanted to share a quick note about an exciting opportunity that some of you might not be aware of, but Canada Beef offers or administers a student awards program to participating schools across Canada. So there's over $20,000 that's awarded to top performing students in culinary and butchery programs from BC to PEI. The Canada Beef Award for Excellence in Culinary and Butchery supports and encourages students encourages student achievement and skill development in hospitality and meat cutting trades. So if you'd like more details, you can head to your school's financial aid office and ask for information there. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chef Mathieu Paré, Executive Director at the Canadian Beef Centre of Excellence in Calgary, Alberta. Chef Mathieu will be guiding us through today's workshop, sharing his vast expertise on Canadian beef, what makes it unique, and the finer details of meat grading. So as much as he can in an hour. Anyway, so Chef Mathieu, over to you.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks a lot, Sabrina, for the nice introduction. It's my pleasure to be here with you, this audience, participants, and very exciting. One of the things that's exciting about it is our ability to reach to you here from Calgary, Alberta, this morning at the Canadian Beef Centre of Excellence at the Office of Canada Beef. And as Sabrina mentioned, we are proud partners in the Cooks the Books and Taste Canada Awards again this year. Today, our objective, we have a very specific objective, and that is to gain a better understanding of what makes Canadian beef great, and also what specifically in terms of our grading system brings to the value and our ability to communicate around the attributes of Canadian beef that consumers and professionals appreciate and put value to themselves. And so it sometimes seems complicated or complex, but it's quite simple in a lot of ways because it's really about building value for the product through a communication system or an understanding of what quality attributes mean to the customers. And those customers are looking for a product. They are customers because they want to buy something from us, whether we are chefs or butchers or producers of beef or the packing industry who processes those products for the marketplace. And so the important thing to understand is it's really a communication tool that is of value to us as chefs and professionals so that we can share that on with our customers and our staff and our students in culinary to gain an understanding of what makes Canadian beef great. So how we're going to do that today is I'm going to share a fairly brief presentation that covers a fairly broad topic and a lot of key points. And so I want you to pay attention to some of those specific points that I'm going to kind of hone in on. And then we're going to have a look at some product to demonstrate those attributes that we've talked about in establishing what is a great grading system in our Canadian beef industry. And then after that, we'll have a chance to do a little bit of question and answer. I hope you've got lots of questions. Maybe you've prepared some in advance, and that would be great. I will do my best to answer everything as best as I can. a little bit about my career, my path to getting into culinary. Before I was actually fully committed to a culinary career, I worked in gemstone jewelry industry. We mined a gemstone, and our company had a product that was fairly new. People referred to our company as having discovered this, but we didn't really discover it. We were just able to bring to that product a value, and that value is actually established through a grading system. And it was quite simple. There were two attributes of that stone, that gemstone, that people really liked, and it was the brilliance of the color, and also the array of colors that this colorful stone provided. And so when we established what we had in terms of a product, we understood that what people liked about it was also actually what was quite rare. And so those attributes and the highest quality of those attributes were what we established as being our finest available, and therefore applied a premium to it. And so there's a parallel there with the Canadian beef and our Canadian beef industry in our grading system, because we've developed a tool as an industry to communicate those attributes and share that with the customers, whether they are customers from the packer who are buying whole sides, or food processors who are committing to large quantities, or even to consumers at the retail store, or chefs who are preparing finely prepared beef in a box. And so that's one of the things I want to help you to understand, is that there are many grading systems out there. And so whether it's a beef or produce or eggs, every product has a way to communicate what is valuable about it. And that's what we have in the Canadian beef grading system. I'm going to share my screen for this PowerPoint presentation, and we will get started on that. And I think you are able to see it now. So what determines the quality of beef, specifically our Canadian beef? There are unique characteristics that beef purchasers prefer, and they indicate that that indicate high quality beef to them. So as consumers, and we're all consumers, we go to the grocery store and we're looking for products that will meet our needs. Similarly, trade users, so the further processors, the people who produce food from beef that they buy from the packers, they are also looking for quality attributes, just like the consumers are. So I've added here a few notes as to what those trade users are looking for in terms of quality attributes, and that's the yield of the carcass. How much lean meat is on that animal or on that carcass, so that they can sell, because the value is in the red lean meat and not necessarily so much in the bones or the fat. The color is important to trade users, because when they present the product, it's going to have a beautiful and attractive color, and that's particularly important in retail, but also as we see more butchery offerings in food service and butchery counters in restaurants, that is becoming more and more important as well. The shape, the composition, the consistency in a way of those products, that's also very important, because we are merchandising those products as we would with pride and skill, and demonstrating its attributes and merchandising that exactly that. So the shape, the composition, and the consistency when your customer wants to come and buy that repeatedly from you. And as consumers, whether we're consuming at the retail store or we're consuming in a food service environment, in a dining room, color is important. Color, we always talk in the food service business that we eat with our eyes first. Tenderness is important. People want to be able to chew their food, but not work at it too hard. And so when we talk about beef, a really key attribute is the tenderness, the juiciness, and the flavor also. The delivery of that yummy, delicious Canadian beef flavor is delivered through those attributes in the quality of the beef, along with the tenderness and the color, as we know from our visual. Before we get into the grading system, I think it's important to understand why we grade our beef, and how we got to a point where we determined that our beef was excellent, and that we needed a system or a way to communicate those attributes. And so we can trace this back to our Canadian beef advantage, or what makes Canadian beef great. And so one of our unique advantages, and a really interesting aspect, is our ability to communicate around Canada's climate. We are a cold country. We are one of the northern countries, and a massive land where we can produce beef. In our environment, we have clean water, beautiful fresh resources, natural wide open spaces. We have grazing lands and natural grasslands that for the animals to range in. And we also have cold winters, which help us to reduce amounts of pests, and they tend to break up those pest cycles, and so that way the animals can live more healthily without diseases and pests that exist in other warmer climates. So the cold climate is really an advantage for us in Canada. In another way, the cold climate is actually helps us to support an industry that only uses the finest quality beef animals. So those are referred to as the Bos Taurus. The genetics that come from Canada are in demand all over the world because of this cold climate, these attributes of those cold climate breeds that develop muscling, that develop marbling fat inside the muscle. And those attributes are really important in terms of consistency and size and shape, and also eating experience, that delicious, juicy, tender, and flavorful beef. So Bos Taurus is the boss of beef production. They are the best animals to use, and we have no influence from other lesser breeds here in Canada because these are the breeds that perform well in the cold climate. As we continue the production of the Canadian beef, the live animal goes from its native farm, from where it was born, where it first drank milk and then ate grass, and then now we finish those animals on high energy feed grains. Another advantage in Canada is our ability to produce and to support grain finishing on our beef, and that's really a key Canadian beef advantage because that's what develops that delicious, beautiful marbling and supports the development of those great muscles and those attributes, and also helps us to achieve those results in a shorter time frame. So those animals, as we know and understand in our culinary careers, younger animals haven't developed the connective tissues that make beef proteins like beef make them tougher and less tender and less juicy. So the younger the animal, the quicker that we are able to produce those animals, the less resources that we need, which makes it efficient and more sustainable, but also supports that awesome, delicious, tender, juicy message and experience. Just gonna invite all that are joining here. Canadian beef advantage also comes back to our ability to trace our animals, the traceability of our system based on an RFID tag, which is a mandatory national federal program. Every animal has an RFID tag, and that way we can actually trace those animals all the way back to their birth farms. Recently, I had an opportunity to participate in a tour of a feeding operation. So at the feedlot, we had a chance to speak with the nutritionist there. A young woman who had a PhD in animal science and nutrition. And so we had a chance to ask her, what's the Canadian beef advantage in your eye? And she said something really important about our traceability system. And when I was considering traceability previously, I believed it was mostly about food safety. And that food safety, means a lot to people. We're not going to eat food that is unsafe, and that's a big part of our Canadian beef advantage and our grading system also, the inspection process. But what was interesting that she said is when it comes to Canadian beef advantage, she thought traceability was key, but from her perspective, it's the ability to trace the quality of the product and the performance from the original farm of that animal all the way to the finish, so that later we know that those animals and those genetics that produce those animals actually produced superior beef. And so with the data that we are collecting here in our Canadian beef industry, we're able to continuously improve that quality of the beef, and that's why we see in this cold climate with those superior Bos Taurus genetics, our ability to continuously fine-tune our product and make it better and better year after year, as well as make it more efficient and more sustainable. And then there's the land and the landscapes here in Canada, and without land, it's not possible to produce beef. The beef animals are large, and they live for up close to 2 years before we go to process. And so they need a sufficient amount of land to do that. They need grass, they need wide open spaces, and they need producers who care about maintaining those environments. The stewardship of these landscapes is really the mindset. It's the dedication of the producers, and they understand better than anyone that with healthy land, healthy resources, water, soil, grass, you produce healthy, high quality beef. And so those things are very much intertwined and a part of each other. And the result is an exceptional eating experience. And I'm sharing a graph here with some research, some data on what quality means to the consumer. And so this research that shows that tenderness and juiciness and flavor are what the consumers describe as their satisfaction in the eating experience. So those three key attributes in that eating experience are what they're talking about when they say this is beef that they like or this is beef that they didn't like. And so you can see there that with the palatability trait for tenderness, juiciness, flavor, and the odds of the failure of that palatability, so basically a rejection from the customer, they did not like their steak because a tenderness was important, 2.2 times to 1, that they said if the tenderness trait wasn't there, that they didn't enjoy their beef. Similarly for juiciness, almost 2 to 1. For flavor, 3.3 times to 1. If they didn't appreciate the flavor, they didn't like their beef. And then when you start to combine those attributes, tenderness and juiciness, tenderness and flavor, you can see that multiplier effect, and it increases that pressure on the performance of the product. And that's where Canadian beef really delivers, in the tenderness, juiciness, and flavor. So how do we guarantee beef quality in Canada? This is now we're transitioning into the actual grading system. And it's important to understand that grading is not inspection. Grading happens after inspection. Inspection for food safety is key because animals that don't pass food safety inspection are not going to get graded. And so those are two separate things. Once the food inspector, Health Canada's CFIA Canadian Food Inspection Agency employee determines that that product is safe to eat because it's a healthy, well cared for animal, it arrives to the plant, it gets that clearance, then the process can occur and that animal can now be processed and graded. And so now what the beef producer or the packer in this case, the packer has received the product from the producer, the animals arrive to the packing plant and they've been processed, and now the beef packer determines, with the help and the service of a Canadian beef grading agency grader, a certified third-party agency that now is delivering a service to the packer to give a third-party perspective or an assessment of that quality of that animal and of that carcass. And so now that the packer has that third party who says this has been determined as this quality, that packer now has a product that they can go to market and say, we didn't decide this quality, we had a Canadian beef grading agency grader give their stamp of approval on this quality, and now we can market it to you, the customer, the consumer, or the trade trade member, the trade operator. So the grading is actually conducted 24 hours after the process of the animal. So the animal gets slaughtered, the carcass gets chilled, and then the cut is performed between the 12th and the 13th rib. You'll see a link at the bottom of our slide here, and that is to an awesome resource or an abundance of resources. You see that website, cdnbeefperforms.ca. We have virtual tours that explain this process. They're animations, and so you can see all this quite in depth. And so if you want to memorize this material, you can go there and learn it off by heart. The grading system now, you see the process here in this flow chart. The animal it is determined that the animal is young. It must be under 30 months of age. 30 months of age, like we discussed, there is a minimum threshold, or I should say a maximum threshold of age, and that is because the tender animals tend to eat better. They're more tender and delicious. So once we have assessed that that animal is a young animal, then we start to eliminate products or carcasses, or not eliminate them, but classify them as a lower standard than what we were looking for. So what we're doing here, and you can see if we get to the end of that graph from left to right, we end up with something that's called Canada Quality Grades. It's important to understand that Canada Quality Grades are the best of Canadian beef production. And so there's a lot of beef that goes into commercial processes. Think about making canned soups, that quality of beef that goes into some of those preparations doesn't necessarily have to be what we're going to see here later today, which is for grilling steaks, for searing, pan searing process, dry heat cooking methods, but something that can tolerate a little bit less of that superior quality. So it's important to understand that, because later we're going to see that it looked like on our graph that a super high percentage of our beef is of the finest quality, and that is amongst the top grades, and that is because due to it, that grading system, which is again a service that the packer receives from the certified or the Canadian Beef Grading Agency. So in order to assess that quality, they have to be confident that they are already working with the best quality. So as we move from the left to the right, we remove the excessively masculine carcasses. That's because bulls typically, historically tend to eat less well. They have a stronger flavor and typically also less tenderness. So those that demonstrate or show excessive masculinity, which is typically assessed on the animal and live animal on its hump, those ones are removed from the processing to achieve quality grade. Next up, we remove dark cutting carcasses. And so they assess the actual meat color. The Canadian Beef Grading Agent takes a colored chit like this, and so they can sample through that hole, basically, does it exceed this minimum threshold, or I should say the maximum threshold for the color of the beef. If it's this as dark as this or darker, it doesn't make the cut and is removed. It's not destroyed, it is just used for a different purpose and doesn't make it to those Canada quality grades. As we move down the line, we also remove carcasses that demonstrate yellow fat color. White fat or close to white fat is very desirable in terms of its look, just like red meat color. And so those ones are also removed. Usually associated with older animals, yellow fat is something that is less appreciated. We have then our next removals. We remove carcasses that demonstrate muscle that has less than perfect or less than ideal firmness, and also of shape, muscling, that conformation of the animal. So you can see that we've now taken from our delivery of animals, our carcasses that we have in our coolers at the packing plant, and we've reduced that down into our best pieces. As cooks in culinary, as we learn and we work with product, we know as we sort through our products, whether it's carrots for our bouquetier garnish on our plating, or any other product, we're always working and sorting out our best pieces to put our best products on the plate. If you've got carrot trim, your carrot trim goes into your carrot soup and not onto your fine dining offering. So this works much in that way. Why are only cattle under 30 months eligible for quality grades? We talked about this briefly. As the animal gets older, the solubility of the collagen is reduced, and so that collagen, the protein that is connective tissue in those muscles, becomes less and less soluble. So that's one of the reasons why veal is so appreciated. Let's say in an ossobuco dish, veal is a very young animal, and it has this collagen that dissolves easily, that solubility, that ability for it to dissolve and become a delicious broth. I'm going to see if there's a few joining still, but so that is the reason why, and you can see it on the graph as we continue down the age or continue towards an older animal from left to right, that solubility decreases. We talked about the masculinity of the carcasses, and that's the reason, because those more masculine carcasses, those more bull-like, and the hump on the neck that just demonstrates that, we remove those as well. Now we look at beef quality for quality grades. So we're talking about the A, the AA, the AAA, and the Canada Prime grade. It's really important to remember that in Canada, we have a grade that is equivalent to the USDA Prime grade, and it's called Canada Prime. It is the highest quality of Canadian beef that is available. So to achieve what is called those quality grades, we look at carcass maturity, again, young animals. How do we determine that once the animal has been processed? We look at the ossification, and the ossification demonstrates, just like as we get older, our bones start to get more brittle and we start to crack in our joints. That doesn't happen when you're a little baby, because you don't have that ossification. You have very soft bone and bone development. The fat and meat color is assessed. So very white or with a tinge of color, yellow or red color to the fat, but really about white fat, and also red meat color is very important. We mentioned we eat with our eyes first. This is the reason why we select for those color attributes. Carcass muscling, again, this is where we assess those attributes of the firmness, of the conformation of those cuts of beef, and the fat and its texture, the fat, the marbling, the intramuscular fat that makes for that tender and juicy eating experience. Looking at the meat color here specifically, the dark cutters. Dark cutters tend to be animals that have experienced some type of stress. So prior to their slaughter, if they experience some environmental, some weather conditions, they arrived at the processing day and they were stressed, they will tend to cut dark. Dark cutting beef is less attractive and therefore is of lower value. And so here in Canada, and unlike in the US, we remove those from our high quality grades. It's also less suitable for aging because it has a lower shelf life, a reduced shelf life. This is a bit of a story. When I had a chance to travel, I went to Manila. I did a presentation at a hotel there, and I was working with the staff on board. One of the staff, I'd done the presentation on meat color, fat color the day previously, and the butchers came to show me some product that he had processed. This was an example of where we saw some dark cutters, and this was product that had come from the US. And so he came over and said, Chef, I think these are dark cutters. And I was like, for sure. And I had not seen this before at that point in my career. I wasn't familiar what dark cutting beef looked like. But in the US, they allow for it. And so you can see here some examples of dark cutting. And I'm sharing them with you here. When we look at understanding the texture and conformation, we are looking for that firmness. Why do we remove those carcasses with softer meat? It has a lot to do with the ability to process that meat. If with more marbling, with more fat, we have more structure, we have more firmness, we're able to better process, better cut, better store, and better merchandise those products. And that's the reason why we remove those carcasses that don't have that firmness and don't have that muscling, that robust muscling that we're looking for. The optimal fat color and the optimal covering, we want a certain amount of fat on the carcass to preserve its tenderness in the chilling process. And so a minimum of 2 millimeters on the carcass, a minimum amount of fat is really essential to make sure when that chilling happens that the meat is not compromised and it doesn't experience any development of toughness. It maintains its tenderness. And so when we're talking about optimal fat and also the color, we're looking for that white color and a nice even covering all over the carcass. This is one important part, that when we look at determining of grades, we're also looking not just at the quality eating attributes, but the ability of that product to perform in terms of its yield. And so this is an assessment of what is usable lean meat on a carcass. And the Canadian Beef Grading Agency grader will use tools to determine the depth of the fat on the carcass. And if there is, I said it was an advantage to have some fat in that chilling process, but it becomes a disadvantage to the buyer of that product if that carcass has too much fat on it, because then they will have less yield and less product to work with in terms of red meat. So there are 5 Canada yield classes, and you can see them here. It's essentially a percentage, a calculated percentage of what the buyer can count on in terms of what they're going to receive in terms of a yield. Now we're looking a little more closely at the range of products that are in the quality grades, and you can see we have, starting from your left to the right, starting with the prime, the best of qualities, Canada quality grades, Canada Prime, then we have the Canada AAA, the Canada AA, and the A grade. And here what we're looking at is an assessment of the marbling standards. The marbling standards are assessed by the grader using cards that they compare and assess the marbling by a standard that's been established. In Canada, we follow a standard that was established by the US. Our main buyer, our main customer for beef in Canada, outside of what we produce for Canadians, is the US. They're our main export market. So they helped us to determine what that customer is looking for, and they made cards that will determine what the quality grades are. And you can see as they look at their cards, they're determining their AAA or a little of the higher part of the AAA, which we're going to cover here in a second as it refers to the top 2/3. And marbling, as we know, makes for a juicy, tender, delicious, and flavorful product. You can see at the bottom, there's different scores for types of marbling. And so the ideal quality of marbling is the fine marbling. There's medium and the more coarse marbling. The more fine marbling, the more ability for that fat to become soluble, and so therefore an ability to be more juicy in the mouthfeel. Here we look at the grading system and the result of the grading system and scoring, and also the equivalency between our beef production industries. We can see here the Canada grading system, the USA's grading system, also Australia and Japan. We're just going to focus mostly here on Canada and US, and you can see, as I was mentioning, the importance of that relationship, our trade relationship with the US, who is our top customer for Canadian products, and that our grading system aligns very closely with theirs. And in AAA, you can see that it is equivalent with the USDA choice, where those assessments of marbling are identical for small, modest, and moderate. One of the things we wanted to discuss a little bit today is also the upper 2/3 of the AAA. So how that process works is the Canadian the food safety inspector has applied their inspection stamp. Now the grader has assessed the quality of that carcass, and in that quality there is a minimum quality standard. So that's where we have the AAA, which is a minimum standard for small marbling. So that you can see in the bottom of the blue in the AAA scoring, small marbling. Now that is the minimum quality. When the packer looks at their product and says, I have 3 assessments here, or 3 quality standard assessments of marbling score, and we have now also a modest marbling score. And so that is within the AAA, but a little bit more intensity in the marbling than our minimum standard, referred to as small. And then above that, so in the upper third, the top third, we now have the moderate marbling score. And so you can see some nuances there in terms of the quality grade. And now the owner of that product, the packer who has purchased it from the beef producer, gets to decide now, okay, well, this is the best of my AAA, and now I'm going to make this my reserve, my special brand, and I can bring those attributes and that conversation with my customers, and I can say, I have set aside the best of my AAA for you, my dear customer. I'm going to make this available to you, and with these branding and these attributes, we can talk about the marbling score. We can talk also about specific breed types. So if part of the story of that particular product is about the type of animal, or whatever breed of animal that they're working with, if they select based on that breed, then that is going to be part of their top 2/3 AAA program. Other AAA programs might be feed types. If they're feeding a specific type of feed that they believe is achieving those excellent attributes, they're going to associate that with their brand and provide you with an elevated AAA, the top 2/3 of the AAA, and this being very high quality, some of the best beef in the world still at the minimum standard called small, and then upper 2/3 modest, and the top of the AAA as moderate. And then after this, you can see we get into prime. Okay, a couple more slides, and then we're going to show you the product we have set aside for you here today. In terms of production in Canada, and this is why I mentioned that we're talking about what is referred to as the quality grade. Quality grades being the A, the AA, the AAA, and the Canada Prime. And so here you can see that continuous improvement in our production. Over the years, we are continuously, and over the months really, we are continuously improving our quality. And now looking at a total quality here, reaching close to 81%, and that would be of our AAA, the AAA grade, and also prime grades, very close to 80% now in production of those quality grades: A, Canada AA, Canada AAA, and Canada Prime. Okay, there's the presentation for you, the technical aspects of of grading, our grading system, and what it means in terms of communicating that quality and building value for Canadian beef and our customers and their understanding of our product. I've stopped sharing. I believe I'm going to end show. And now I'm going to hand my device over to my partner. Thank you. Okay. Next up, we're looking at the products specifically, and we're going to look at them each individually. I've got some set aside here. So we talked about the attributes. Very important to understand this. So when you're communicating with your teams, with your clientele, the attributes. Here is a great example of a AA grade steak. AA grade, just like AAA and just like Prime, as well as A grade, but we don't produce that much A grade actually, because the grading process requires an investment. And what we want to do is grade for quality. So the AA is generally where the quality grades in Canada begins, although there is some A available. So the AA grade, we can see beautiful fine flecks of fat. We can see pretty much white fat color on the exterior of that strip loin steak. These are strip loin steaks cut from the strip loin, also known as a New York steak. You can see the beautiful marbling, beautiful red color of that beef. We cut these nice and thick. You can also see that it has firmness. It isn't soft. It isn't a floppy steak that would be difficult to cut. And so that there is a AA grade Canadian beef strip loin steak. I'm going to put this one here, right there. I think you can see that. And a label. How's that look there, Cameron? Looking good. Now we move to AAA, a AAA grade steak. So we compared it a little bit. Well, we will compare it side by side with the AA. Let's do that right now. With the AA steak, the AAA steak now, we see more intense marbling, more fine flecks of beautiful fat within that, achieved through grain finishing. Quality grade AAA, essentially taking from the same quality attributes of that AA, but increasing the quality through the marbling. This is really the key in this conversation. The key in the Canadian beef story and of our grading system is AAA. You can actually see also that with this steak, it even has a little bit more firmness, and that firmness is associated with that fat, that beautiful fat that's in that muscle. For the grand finale here, just want to build a little bit of anticipation and excitement here, because we have what is an absolutely beautiful strip loin of Canadian beef. This one here, graded Prime, Canada Prime grade. Really important. Again, understand that we have Canada Prime in Canada, equivalent to US beef, the USDA Prime grade. And so we're going to take a quick look here at some of those absolutely beautiful attributes. So we looked at the AA, we looked at the AAA, and now you can see that intensity of the marbling, that beautiful, awesome flecks of fat. This is typically reserved for food service operations, where the value and the expression of that value can be best communicated with the consumer. And so when we go to the table and we talk about our special offering, we have Canada Prime on our menus. And what does that mean? It means tenderness and juiciness and flavor achieved through elevated marbling that we have here in our Canadian beef industry, and grain finishing. This is the only way I know that they can be produced. Quality beef like this is through that grain finishing process. And so those are attributes to celebrate and express and share with your clientele in those moments. Share it with your staff, share it with your front of house staff. Make sure everyone understands what Canada Prime means, also what AAA means, and what AA means. It means beef that has excellent marbling and excellent juiciness, tenderness, and flavor. We're going to cut one of these here for our display. Match them up with the other ones. And there it is. Our beautiful Canada Prime. How does that display look there? And our AAA. and our prime grade, Canada Prime. And so we can take a look also at our marbling cards, our scorecards that the graders used to assess this quality. And so matching here now, as we are here now grading experts, we have our slight, this is for our AA minimum standards. You can see that those are fairly closely matched. We have now our minimum standard for the AAA, more flex, a fine flex of fat, matching this strip loin steak. These are rib steaks. But you can see that marbling score. And then for our finest quality, there we go, our prime grade. And there you have it. Okay. So just to recap, we've covered our Canadian beef advantage, the story of the beef producer and of our industry, the food safety that is of utmost importance in terms of our product. We discussed the grain finishing practices that elevate the quality of the product for the industry by bringing animals to market at a younger age that is improves sustainability, improves efficiency, and also makes for excellent quality eating experience, which is ultimately the foundation of our product. And then we looked at the grading system quite in depth to better understand how we eliminate deficiencies and lower quality products from our quality grades. Like I mentioned, our quality grades are not the all of what we produce in Canada. It is the best of what we produce in Canada, starting with Canada A, Canada AA, Canada AAA, and Canada Prime. And now we've demonstrated here and shown you the spectrum of quality attributes in marbling and the final assessment in terms of that culinary quality, that eating experience, that now as culinary professionals, we can better understand how to use the product in terms of its applications for dry heat cooking methods, let's say with these steaks, and also for other applications, which I think we can talk about a little bit as we wrap up in our discussion here today. And so I would like to switch back to where we can have a chat with Sabrina and see if we have any questions from our audience. And I want to say also thank you for your patience while we dealt with a quick technical issue there.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thank you, Chef Mathieu. That was amazing. So informative and insightful. And the side-by-side comparison of the three steaks really brought it all together. It's great to see them compared next to each other, to see the extra marbling, the slight, kind of differences in the fat color really brought all the information home. So thank you for doing that and sharing it with us. Yeah, to open to questions from our attendees. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask Chef Mathieu to expand on, or perhaps something he shared ignited a new curiosity that we can explore together.
I'm all ears. I can hear you now.
Okay, so we have a question here. When it comes to nutrition, are there any significant differences between the quality grades? So is a AA grade steak less or more nutritious than a AAA or Canadian Prime steak?
Yeah, awesome question about nutrition. Canadian beef is super nutritious. It's a protein that delivers it's a powerhouse of nutrition for protein, for iron, for what else? For sorry, talking here is powerhouse. The nutritional quality of the Canadian beef are excellent, and there is no difference actually between quality grades in terms of the nutritional values. So whether we're talking about A grade or prime, they are relatively similar. The one thing that's going to change is you're going to have a little bit more fat in your prime, but through the cooking process, a lot of that fat is rendered out in its contribution, in its basting, basically internal basting of the product. And so there's a little bit of a fat difference, but in terms of the base nutrition, there is no difference. Equally nutritious.
Great.
Thanks for that question. Great
Good to
question.
Know. All right. Any other questions for Chef?
I guess I could stimulate a bit of conversation here. I mentioned it before we were closing. We talked a little bit about the dry heat cooking methods, and the dry heat cooking methods that benefit from that extra marbling and that tenderness and the juiciness that sort of it protects the steak. You know, in the industry, we believe that only, or you know, as chefs, let's say that, you know, we got to eat the steaks medium rare, but in some cases, you know, people are not necessarily that's maybe not their preference. As an example, we have customers in the Middle East, in Dubai, let's say, for instance, and they eat Canadian beef in fine dining restaurants, but their preference is actually for well done meat, whatever the cut. And so when they choose Canadian beef in those markets, and they, you know, pay quite a premium for it, but what they want is, and what the chefs and the operators there appreciate, is the ability of Canadian beef to deliver in terms of its juiciness and flavor, even when cooked well done. That tenderness comes through, that juiciness comes through, even if it's cooked to a higher degree. When we look, let's say, at wet cooking methods, moist heat cooking methods, now we're talking about like long, slow cooks, stewing, braising, or even working in sous vide. That more gentle, soft cooking, but longer periods of time, it's maybe not as necessary to select of the finest quality in terms of marbling. And because we're cooking in liquid or using liquid to cook and cooking slowly through the slow cooking process, the collagen that we talked about, the connective tissues, that protein, it has a chance to further break down and become part of the sauce. And at the same time, that fat that we were talking about, that extra fat that we have, let's say, in prime grade or in upper two-thirds AAA, which of course is very flavorful. And I wouldn't say, you know, deny yourself of a stew that has that superior premium quality, but it might not be absolutely necessary, especially if you find yourself, let's say, cooking a stew or a soup and stripping off that fat. You could use a lower quality A grade or AA, and it work really well for those applications if you're working with braising cuts, let's say from the chuck or from the hind quarter in the leg, or beef shank as an example. So there's an opportunity there to explore lower quality within the A grades and still have an awesome result, and not sort of sacrifice or lose those quality attributes that you've you know, basically invested in and purchased in the finest quality available of Canadian beef.
That's great. That's really interesting. Yeah, those moist cook methods do seem like they would be a good fit for, the grades that have a little less fat. That makes a lot of sense. I have another question here. Andrea saying steak for dinner tonight, which I absolutely echo. I was ready for steak at the AA, and definitely ready for when you showed off the prime cut. So we're asking here, what would you say is the most or best the best or most unique differentiating quality about Canadian beef?
Okay. I'd just say there's two things about Canadian beef that are really very special. Well, one, and we talked about, is our Canadian beef story, the producer story, our cold climate, and that consistency that comes from Canadian beef or beef that is produced in Canada. That story makes it very marketable. So I think the marketability of the Canadian beef and the story of Canadian beef, when well told, it really helps to connect with the consumer around our wide open spaces, around our awesome nature, around our awesome food system, the food safety, and also the quality, the grain finishing. That's part of it. I think that is the one thing that one of the two things that I think are most significant. And then the second one is what I would refer to as taste. And what I think is interesting about taste is, by definition, taste also involves mouthfeel. And so tenderness becomes part of taste. Juiciness becomes part of taste. And so not only the flavor, but the whole combined package of the eating experience that we achieve through Canadian beef and the quality standards that we have, that taste of Canadian beef. So two things: the marketability for the Canadian beef story, and also the taste performance of the product. Those are the two things that stand out most for me. And I mean, I'm a Canadian. I've lived in Canada basically my whole life. I've grown up eating Canadian beef, and I've always appreciated it because I love steak and beef generally. But the opportunity that I've had working with Canada Beef to travel and to share Canadian beef with people from other countries, you know, in trade shows, a big part of what I would do is, you know, my chef job going to a trade show is cutting cooking steaks, cutting pieces, and sharing them with people who have never tasted Canadian beef before. And I am not joking when I say I can actually see their eyes water, like they're experiencing an emotional experience in this product. And that is because the taste is actually just almost overwhelming. This is not something that people experience in their home countries all over the world. And it is due to our Canadian beef advantage, which is part of that cold climate and our producer story and our grain finishing that we discussed earlier.
There you go. Canadian difference. We're cold, so it gets that flavor in there.
And just go like this. Everybody understands. Oh, Canada cold.
Yeah,
Canadian
perfect.
beef advantage. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more question. I think we have one more, or time for one more. Somebody is asking, what impact does the time between harvest and grading have on the final quality of beef, if any?
Impact of the time between harvest and grading on quality. That I don't know an answer to. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer. If there is an impact on that, I think there is a reason why the carcasses are chilled before the grading process happens. But I think that is probably, I'm going to guess, we talked about how the product performs in terms of its firmness and our ability to cut the product, and that has a lot to do with the cold. When the animal is harvested, the animal is warm, and so it requires a certain amount of time to be properly chilled, and then over that course of the 24 hours, that's when then the ribbing can occur between the 12th and 13th rib to expose the quality. And I think if we did that too soon before that point, then it would be more difficult to make that cut, and that has to do with that the temperature, the cold of the product.
That makes sense. I would tend to agree with that. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of our hour. It's definitely been filled with so much insightful and valuable information. So, Chef Mathieu, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us, giving us a deeper understanding of the Canadian beef grading system and the Canadian beef difference. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. We really appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to all of the students and participants who joined us. So whether you're participating in Cooks the Books or just here to sharpen your skills, we hope you found today's workshop valuable. And also to the culinary and butchery instructors and the programs across Canada, the work you do and the dedication you show to education in this field is remarkable and so valuable. And we're all grateful for your investment and your partnership. And so again, finally, I will be sharing the recording later this week. And also, if anybody wants more information about nutrition and beef, Canada Beef has a registered dietitian on staff, and she's always happy to take questions. So just reach out and we can connect you. Also, if you head to thinkbeef.ca, there's a wide variety of resources there that can support nutrition kind of questions. So check it out. Yeah, so that's it for today. So, have a great day to everybody. Thank you again for joining us, to Chef Mathieu and Canada Beef and the team at the Excellence Center. Again, we appreciate you having us. And to everybody in Cooks the Books, we wish you good luck, and we'll see you soon in person.
Much pleasure to have you.
Everybody.
Hope to reconnect with you soon. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.